Hi again. Now, as you can see, I've completed the whole of the top section, including the dark area at the very top, and I've also completed the green and the darker section within the green. The last section that I want to do is to darken this area up a little bit more. Although it looks very dark, it is actually quite patchy. Now, a piece of advice that I would give to anybody that is trying to get a very, very dark colour down on a drawing would be, don't just use black. As logical as it sounds, you use black to make a dark area. Black is a very flat colour, and if you use black on its own, it will end up looking very flat. Now, I want this to look very 3D, like it's part of the background. Even though it's out of focus, I still want it to look part of the background. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to incorporate a couple of colours into the background with the black, which will give it a much richer tone. And one of the colours that I'm going to be incorporating is Caput Mortem Violet. So what we'll do first is I am just going to do, again, circular motions with a very, very light hand, just to get an overall coverage of this colour, where I will then be putting the black, because it will add depth to the colour and it will then stop it looking flat. Now, it doesn't look like a very dark colour, but it does add depth to it. So I'll just keep going around and just adding this colour. And once I've gone around the whole section that I want this colour to be on, we will then go over it with the black. But with this technique, you're layering colour and then black and then colour and then black until you get the depth that you want. Now, as you can see, I have already done several layers, so I don't need to do very much more to this, but I do need to make it a little bit darker because it's just not quite how I want it. And I won't leave it until it's perfect. So I'll just come down here slightly. Now, this lower portion of the black down here is actually mixed with a green, so I will only work up to about this area with this really nice deep red colour. And once I've finished here, I will get my trusty blending stump out. I don't need to blend the colour that's on the black, because that will more than likely just take a lot of the colour back off, but this area here will need to be blended just a small bit. So there we go. Now I've added all of that colour that I want. So now I will take the black, again it's a Polychromos black, and now I will go over again with the black in circular motions with a light hand. I will apply slightly more pressure because I do want there to be a certain depth of colour on it. I'll ever so slightly overlap the green, just to give the hint of a shadow around that green area, because if there's a very, very dark colour next to a relatively light colour, there's always going to be a shadow. And I'll ever so slightly overlap the yellow as well. Still going in my circular motion. And if there's any sections that I can see that doesn't seem to be picking up the colours so well, I will focus much more on that one little area and do much smaller circles. If necessary, I would do an odd line, but I would make sure that the line isn't visible. Say here, for example, I'm not sure if you can see it on the camera, but there is just a small area there that's just having a little bit of trouble picking up any extra pigment. So I'm going to work much closer with that area, doing much smaller circles. And we'll come up here and go around this lovely mustardy colour. And I'm even going to go into this area here. But I don't want it to be as dark as the main area because this is where the shadow is actually lightening up a little bit. So I'm using a much lighter hand than I was on the rest of it. And I won't go all the way down to the bottom. And again, this area where it is lighter, I will use my blending stump to actually blend some of this colour out, because I want it to look nice and even when it's completed. And it's just this section here where it's still ever so slightly patchy. And then I'd say that that little area there was done. Now for the red here, I'll just blend it out very gently because I don't want to pull the colour off. I just want to blend the black into that red colour to give it some extra depth, like that. But I don't want to take the colour off. Now this area I won't blend at all because I want it, apart from just around the yellow section there, I want it to be really deep and bold. But just around the yellow, if you notice when I'm blending, it's moving the black ever so slightly to give a softer shadow. There we go. Now this bottom section, again, I'm now using the olive green yellowish, and I will start by doing circles. I'll just bleed into that yellow ever so slightly, and I'll also bleed into the area that was the very last section that was red, just to make sure that there's no gaps and no areas that don't have the extra colour on. Now I'm using longer circles here because I need to fill the whole area with this colour before I go over with the black. As long as the whole area is covered, it doesn't really matter how long or short your circles are. I'll just go over this section ever so slightly as well, because this is thrown into the shadow of the dark again, so you want to make sure that the edges bleed in nice and smoothly with the black and there isn't a very sharp transition between the two. And again, there's an area here that's slightly darker than the rest of it, so I will get my pencil eraser and almost tap it until the darker sections actually come off and I'm left with an even tone all the way around it. This is a fantastic tool. I've only recently purchased one of these. I've never used one until recently, and I don't know how I manage without one. Now, and then I will go back over this bottom area with the black to make sure that I cover all of the green that I've just applied, and I'll go over the edges ever so slightly just to cast the very edges back into the shadow and to give it a nice smooth transition, like so. And we'll go up. Now you don't have to do very straight sections, you don't have to do it section by section, as long as all the sections are actually covered. That's the most important thing. Excuse my phone beeping away. just blend in that last section there. And ever so slightly blend the black just over the edge of the yellow where I put that green, the olive green, to give the nice smooth transition. I don't want any harsh lines at all. Now I'm just going to go over this edge here just to make sure it's nice and smooth. And there we go. Now the only area that I've got left to complete in this section is just this very, very top bit here, which is going to be a very, very pale green. So in order for me to work on this next section, I'm going to have to clean my blending stump. So I thought it was a perfect opportunity to show you how I do that. Now, as you can see, this blending stump is filthy. It's now really dirty. And because I'm going to be using very pale green, I don't want that on there. So I just use a piece of, let me just zoom out ever so slightly. I use a piece of just normal sandpaper, very, very fine grain sandpaper. And as you can see, this is a well-loved piece. But all I do simply is get the blending stump, wait until it focuses if it's going to. No, it looks like it's not going to. So I get the blending stump and I literally just go from the actual body of the blending stump to the tip. And I just run it. I don't scrub it like that because that just damages it and it makes it go very, very fluffy, which is neither use nor ornament. So you do single strokes and you go all the way down. And I rotate it after every stroke. I rotate it just a small bit. Find another clean piece of sandpaper. As you can see, I'm just rotating it ever so slightly. And you can see now that that is an awful lot cleaner than it was. Now, if you had a brand new piece of sandpaper, it would obviously clean an awful lot quicker. But it doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs a certain amount of the pigment to be off it in order to continue on with the project. And with me using still the greens, but just a much lighter shade, I wanted most of the pigment off. And as you can see, that is an awful lot cleaner than it was. So I will now leave you to enjoy having watched the video, and I will get on with doing the light green section. Thank you for watching.